Am I right to say you were a frontman before My Chemical Romance, and then
Yeah.
well, fair enough. Then obviously stomach aches. You kind of take on this role again. Did you in between? Did you store up all kinds of ideas then that you had?
I don't know if not like a stockpiling, but I feel like, at least for me, where I draw inspiration from, are from experiences and just mundane things that I see along the way, So that kind of stuff, those inspirations, I stockpile. But you never know when those are gonna mean something more. You could see something as simple as, all right, here's an example. Like 2 years ago, no, maybe more actually, 3 years ago, I played a benefit show where I had written a couple of songs, and it was for a local label called Fadeaway Records, and I got up at one of my favorite venues of all time in Jersey, Maxwell's. I played a couple of songs, and after the show, this young lady came up to me and gave me this pin. And there's a very famous photograph of Sid Vicious wearing a pin that says "I'm a mess" on it. And she gave me this pin that was she had made. It was like a replica of it. And we started to talk about anxiety and feelings of inadequacy and things like that. And she's like, I feel like in the interviews I've seen or things I've read about you, and that you deal with that as well. And I made you this pin because it was kind of, I have one too, kind of thing. And it was, and the conversation was inspiring to me, and it meant something, and I knew that was important, but I didn't know why yet. And then flash forward to now 2016, I wrote a song called "I'm a Mess," and it's directly inspired by that moment, that conversation, and that pin, and I still have that pin. So these are the things, I feel like you stockpile these experiences, maybe they're not songs just yet, but they turn into something later on.
But you touched upon something that's very interesting, which is the interaction with people who listen to your music. So is that in the back of your mind when you write a song, or is it still a very personal thing that you do?
It's both. Okay. With Stomach Aches, it was not in my mind at all, because it was just for me. Why? Because I had no intention of writing a record and putting it out. Okay. It was purely a selfish process, where songs were coming to me, and I felt like I found out that writing those songs and recording those songs made me feel physically better when I was feeling sick. And so that's just what I did in order to kind of reclaim that part of me. And then it came out. This time around, I knew that I was going to be writing a record that people were going to hear. And whereas I didn't take into account whether people would like things or dislike things like that, that's neither here nor there, because ultimately it doesn't matter. I think that would be shortchanging the art form. But what I did take into account is that people were going to hear it. And I wanted to be clear with what I meant on certain things. And I wanted to be conscious of how they were going to hear things and how it was going to sound to them and stuff like that. I want them to have their own interpretations, of course, but I wanted to know that I was being as clear as possible. And like I said, the presentation was as perfect as it could be. So that came into play.
Sure. And then, well, we've discussed parachutes, the way music functions in a way. But knowing that your music can function or does function as a parachute for others, what does that do to you?
That's amazing. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate goal, because I remember being a young kid and, back to going down to Trenton or South Jersey and visiting my dad and stuff like that. One of my chores, right, was I would go to my granduncle's house and I would take my dad's cymbals where he had a practice studio. I would take his cymbals and I have to clean his cymbals. But the cool thing about it was he had a record player and this huge collection of records. And I would listen to all these songs. I would listen to the Beatles and Otis Redding and Percy Sledge and the Rolling Stones and all these bands. And it was it changed my life. It allowed me to kind of float and take time and I, you know, down the line, like I found out about punk rock, and these bands, these songs became, you know, parachutes for me. And then all I could ever ask for is to write songs that would affect others the way that these songs affected me. I mean, that would be the ultimate, you know. So to be that for someone else is like a dream come true.
You mentioned growing up in a culture where sports was the main thing, and so at that time, who were the people you were listening to who functioned as parachutes for you?
You know, my parents, but also too, I had a neighbor. Okay. His name was Danny, and he was a couple years older than me, but we became like thick as thieves. Like we were best friends, inseparable. So every time, like every day after school, like we would go hang out, and we would like, you know, like just, you know, play like, you know, in the backyard, or like, you know, like run around town, like play with GI Joes and all this stuff. And you know, he was, but he wasn't like everybody else that I knew. He was artistic, and he was really smart. He wanted to be an architect when he grew up, and he was. I remember, like, you know, like his favorite food was artichokes. It was like, he was so weird, you know what I mean? But he was so rad. He was my best friend, and then, you know, later on in life, like he came out as a homosexual, and it took him a long time to figure that out, or at least to come to grips with it, because, you know, he had a child early on in his life, in his teens and stuff like that, and I think he had a difficult time with that, but he was definitely a parachute, because he showed me that things could be different. Like I didn't have to, like, you know, be like everybody else. You know what I mean? And he ended up, they moved away before I went into high school, and so, you know, it was a lonely period between, I think, like, you know, maybe 7th grade is when they moved down south, and then, you know, like, you know, it was 8th grade. I was like, oh man, I have no, you know, like, there's no one normal to hang out with anymore. I gotta, you know, oh man, I hope high school is awesome.
So then the guitar came.
Then the guitar came, absolutely, yeah. It did. You're right. Yeah, that's exactly the timeline, man. It's crazy. Yeah, and for a while there was probably a good couple of months where I had a guitar and didn't know how to play it, so I would just like put it on and like play, like pretend to play in front of a mirror. You know what I mean? Yeah, finally, everybody knows what I mean. Everybody's done that.
Finally, then, what is one of the best reactions you've had from fans to your music?
Oh man, I guess, you know, the fact that you can come to, you know, different countries or different cities, especially different countries where, like, there's a language barrier, which is, you know, it's a hard thing to overcome with like lyrics and stuff like that. But musically, it's universal, right? So to come to a place where, you know, you never thought you would ever go, that doesn't speak the same language, and have someone come to you and tell you that they connect to something that you made in your room at home, and it helped them get through a tough time in their life, or, you know, they made a friend at your show. Like, that's awesome. You know what I mean? That means that, you know, like, one person actually can make a difference in another person's life, and there's like a ripple effect to that. You know, that's unbelievable. Yeah.
I think that's a good way to end the interview. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.